Hello and welcome to Indus News. Live from Islamabad, I'm Naila Shuja and these are the headlines. Pakistan's President Arif Alvi says the Kashmir dispute should be resolved for peace in the region. Addressing the Pakistan Day military parade in Islamabad, he said Pakistan is fully equipped to defend its territorial integrity and sovereignty. He added Pakistan's desire for peace should not be taken as its weakness, as any misadventure will receive a befitting response. Meanwhile, all military and paramilitary forces participated in March Past, while Air Chief Marshal Zahir Ahmed Babar led the fly-past on a F-16 fighter jet. Top civil military leadership and foreign dignitaries attended the parade. Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi says the country has undergone transformation and shifted its priorities from geopolitics to geoeconomics. He was addressing the Pakistan-Hungary dialogue in Islamabad, where he said the focus would be based on a new economic security paradigm. He said peace, development, and connectivity are the key pillars of the new security paradigm. A top U.S. lawmaker says the Biden administration is looking to keep troops in Afghanistan past the May 1st deadline agreed with the Taliban. Addressing an online forum, U.S. Armed Services Committee Chairman Adam Smith said the Biden administration is exploring a deal in which the Taliban would allow the counterterrorism force to remain in Afghanistan. The Taliban have previously warned of consequences if the U.S. does not stick to the agreed timetable. North Korea has fired 2 ballistic missiles into the sea near Japan days after it launched 2 short-range missiles. Japan's Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga said the launch represents a threat to peace and stability in the region and violates UN resolutions. Earlier, U.S. President Joe Biden downplayed Pyongyang's short-range missile test, saying it was not a provocation. Brazil's COVID-19 death toll has topped 300,000 with over 2,000 deaths in the last 24 hours. Pakistan's death count has crossed 14,000 as 63 more people died, while nearly 4,000 tested positive for the virus overnight. Globally, the virus has claimed over 2.7 million lives and infected more than 124 million people so far. And the Olympic torch relay has set off from Fukushima, beginning a 4-month countdown to the Summer Games in Tokyo. About 10,000 runners will carry the torch across Japan's 47 prefectures and far-flung islands. The first section of the relay did not have any spectators to prevent large crowds amid special COVID-19 precautions. For more news and details, stay tuned. We'll be right back after a short break. Welcome back. Pakistan's President Arif Alvi says the Kashmir dispute should be resolved for peace in the region. The president was also addressing the Pakistan Day parade in Islamabad as the chief guest. More in this report.
23rd March commemorates the historic Lahore Resolution, which led to the creation of Pakistan. The resolution was presented by the then Chief Minister of Bengal, A.K. Fazul Haq, at Minto Park, Lahore. The Joint Services Pakistan Day Parade was held with full zeal at Shakarpariya Parade Ground in Islamabad. Top civil and military leadership, as well as foreign dignitaries, including Sri Lanka's military leadership, attended the annual event. It kicked off with Air Chief Marshal Zahir Ahmed Babar leading the flypast on an F-16 fighter jet, while formations of F-16, JF-17, Mirage, AWACS, P-3C Orion, and ATR aircraft participated in the flypast. All military and paramilitary forces participated in the march past. While fighter jets and aircraft of Pakistan Air Force and Navy conducted flypast, Missile Corps Nasser battlefield ballistic missile, Babar 1 cruise missile, Shaheen ballistic missile, and domestically made drones were proudly displayed. Pak Army Aviation's Cobra and Mi-35 gunship helicopters also presented their skills. Pakistan's Pride JF-17 Thunder displayed unique maneuvers, while Pakistani and Turkish pilots on F-16 fighter jets presented their skills on the sky. Addressing the Pakistan Day parade, President Arif Alvi said India is violating international laws by carrying out atrocities in occupied Kashmir. Alvi said Pakistan and the world community have been raising concerns over Indian brutalities in the occupied valley, especially after the revocation of Article 370. He said the enemy should not consider Pakistan's desire for peace in the region as our weakness. President Alvi said Pakistan is equipped to defend its territorial integrity and sovereignty, categorically stating that any misadventure will receive a befitting response. Alvi also paid tribute to the country's armed forces and civilians for their sacrifices in the fight against terrorism. The president said Pakistan successfully fought the war against the coronavirus pandemic with limited resources, setting an example for several developed nations. Later, the skydivers of the forces from Bahrain, Iraq, Palestine, Sri Lanka, and Turkey exhibited freefall, carrying national flags and those of services. A Turkish military band on the occasion presented different tunes of Pakistani national songs. The parade also showcased the local cultures of the 4 provinces as floats from Sindh, Punjab, Balochistan, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, Gilgit-Baltistan, and Azad Kashmir were featured during the ceremony. Different national songs were also presented on the occasion from the float of ISPR. Dole Party presented different colors of the country's diverse culture. The floats of Ministry of Science and Technology and the frontline healthcare workers against COVID-19 were also part of the parade. Prime Minister Imran Khan was unable to attend as he is currently in quarantine after testing positive for COVID-19.
Pakistan says it has undergone a transformation and shifted its priorities from geopolitics to geoeconomics. Addressing the Pakistan-Hungary dialogue, Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi said Islamabad's focus will be based on a new economic security paradigm. Qureshi said the structural and policy reforms have led to an improved investment ecosystem. He urged Hungarian companies to invest in Pakistan and pursue joint venture opportunities with Pakistani businesses. Qureshi noted that an improved security situation in the country has led to many European countries revising their travel advisories for Pakistan. His counterpart, Peter Zijotraro, said Budapest's policy of opening towards East will provide a good impetus to Pakistan-Hungary relations. More than 100 well-reputed Hungarian and Pakistani companies attended the event. A top U.S. lawmaker says the Biden administration is looking to keep troops in Afghanistan past the May 1st deadline agreed with the Taliban. Addressing an online forum, U.S. Armed Services Committee Chairman Adam Smith said the Biden administration is exploring a new deal in which the Taliban would allow a counterterrorism force to remain in Afghanistan. More in this report.
With just weeks left before a troops withdrawal deadline, it agreed with the Taliban last year to end the longest war in U.S. history. Washington is seeking to push the Afghan government and the Taliban to share power. Last week, Reuters quoted senior Afghan officials as saying that Afghan President Ashraf Ghani is likely to propose a new presidential election within 6 months. They said that Ghani will unveil his proposal at an international gathering in Istanbul next month. They added the proposal signals Ghani's refusal to a U.S. draft peace plan calling for an inclusive interim setup to pave the way for peace. President Joe Biden has previously said it's very difficult to meet the troops' deadline, but the Taliban have warned of consequences if the U.S. does not stick to the agreed timetable.
North Korea has fired 2 ballistic missiles into the sea near Japan. This comes after Pyongyang launched 2 short-range non-ballistic cruise missiles off the west coast on Sunday. Japan's Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga said the launch poses a threat to regional peace and stability and violates UN resolutions. He said he will thoroughly discuss North Korea with U.S. President Joe Biden during his visit next month. Meanwhile, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has called for efforts to maintain peace in the Korean peninsula. In a statement after a meeting with his South Korean counterpart Chung Eui-yong in Seoul, Lavrov warned against all kinds of military activities in the region. The U.S. and the European Union have agreed to work together to de-escalate the Eastern Mediterranean. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken met EU Foreign Policy Chief Joseph Borrell in Brussels. In a joint statement, they said both U.S. and EU want a cooperative and mutually beneficial relationship with Turkey. Blinken and Borrell also agreed to launch a dialogue on China and work together to address Russia's confrontational behavior. Borrell said the 2 sides will continue to work for the U.S. return to Iran's nuclear deal. Earlier, Blinken said the U.S. will not force any NATO ally to pick between Washington and Beijing. Speaking at NATO headquarters, he added countries can work with China where possible. In Myanmar, thousands of pro-democracy activists took to the streets a day after a nationwide silent strike. This marks the 51st straight day of demonstrations against the military coup. Street protests are being held in the commercial capital Yangon, the central city of Manyaba, and several other towns. Police broke up a street demonstration in the city of Mwalamini and arrested 20 people. At least 2 people were injured, but there were no other reports immediately of casualties elsewhere. Activists say at least 286 people have been killed by security forces since February 1st. Meanwhile, the U.S. says it is planning to impose sanctions on 2 conglomerates controlled by Myanmar's military. The death toll from COVID-19 in Brazil has crossed 300,000, with more than 2,000 fatalities in the last 24 hours. Globally, the virus has claimed 2.7 million lives and infected more than 124 million people so far. More in this report.
With the cases surging across the globe once again and discrepancies surrounding vaccine drives rising, the world is now seeing an unprecedented COVID-19 crisis. AstraZeneca has lowered its vaccine effectiveness to 76% after criticism of an earlier report for using outdated information. However, Canada updated the product label for the Oxford jab to provide information on very rare reports of blood clots. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization says reports of extremely rare blood clots should not deter governments from distributing the vaccine. In the United States, President Joe Biden announced the release of $81 billion from the COVID-19 relief bill for school reopenings. Meanwhile, in Brazil, the outbreak is reaching its worst stage, fanned by patchy vaccine rollout and a lack of nationwide strategy.
The model for coping with the pandemic in Brazil has been completely disastrous. For the country to reduce this damage in the future, we have to create a federal pact to bring together the federal government with the state and municipal sectors so that Brazilians feel safer when it comes to the compliance of rules for effectiveness and prevention, and also for a rapid increase in the speed of the vaccination.
The EU and the UK say they are working together on specific steps to create a win-win situation and expand vaccine supply. In France, the number of COVID-19 patients in intensive care units keep rising, setting new highs for 2021. Belgium is set to impose a new lockdown again to contain a rising third wave.
We have seen that the contaminations double almost every 2 weeks. We see that the level of circulation of the virus is at the highest level for 4 months. We see that pressure is building on our intensive care units, which is likely to become unsustainable in the long term.
And UNICEF says India will likely delay the deliveries of vaccine doses to the COVAX facility for March and April. India's daily COVID-19 infections have risen to 5-month high with over 53,000 overnight cases.
Pakistan's coronavirus positivity ratio has shot past 10% as the country battles a third wave of the pandemic. With 63 more deaths reported in the last 24 hours, the toll has crossed 14,000. Nearly 4,000 people tested positive overnight, the highest single-day rises in cases since July 2020. This marks the 8th straight day that Pakistan has reported more than 3,000 new infections. The country has so far recorded more than 640,000 cases, of which 588,000 people have recovered. The Health Ministry says the number of active cases in the country is approaching 38,000. The ministry said more than 2,500 people are in critical condition across the country. It's now time for a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. China has urged the United States to stop discriminatory measures against Chinese firms. This comes after Washington adopted measures to kick some foreign companies off its stock exchanges. At a news briefing, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Hua Chunying said U.S. measures distort market principle. Earlier, shares in dual-listed Chinese companies fell sharply after U.S. securities started their delisting process. The law aims to remove Chinese firms if they fail to comply with auditing standards for more than 3 years. It also requires the firms to prove they are not owned by the Chinese or any other foreign government. Suez Canal has temporarily suspended traffic as efforts to move a giant vessel blocking the waterway continue for the third day. In a statement, Suez Canal authorities said 8 tugs, the largest with a towing power of 160 tons, are trying to dislodge the container, while authorities overseeing the dislodging process said it can take weeks to clear the single-lane stretch of the canal. Several dozen vessels have either piled up at either end of the canal to create one of the worst shipping jams in years. China and Saudi Arabia have vowed to oppose interference in internal affairs of the countries. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi said Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman made the remarks in a meeting in Saudi city of Neom. Wang Yi said advancing ties with Riyadh is a priority for China's Middle East policies. He expressed support for Saudi Arabia's greater role in the region. The two also discussed the Palestinian and Israel issue and called for two-state solution. Meanwhile, Mohammed bin Salman said China is a world power with significant influence, stressing that its rise is inevitable. He said Saudi Arabia is ready to join hands with China to uphold the principles of UN Charter and safeguard global peace and stability. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has said the government would look at sending troops to Yemen if the conditions were right. Addressing the Commons Committee for Foreign Affairs, Johnson said there has been no specific request or suggestion for UK engagement so far. Johnson said the situation would have to be very different before British military's involvement in the war. Meanwhile, the Marib offensive by Houthis has intensified in recent days, prompting sweeping air raids by Saudi-led coalition. Washington has again called for an immediate end to Marib offensive, saying all parties should come to a dialogue table. However, the U.S. and the United Nations have welcomed the Yemeni government's decision to clear 4 fuel ships to enter through Hodeidah port. Moscow says NATO has choose either confrontation or cooperation with Russia. Russia's envoy Vienna Konstantin Gravulul says the North Atlantic Alliance is trying to eat its cake and have it too. He said it is impossible to establish mutual trust if NATO continues military buildup along Russia's borders. Gravulov said in such conditions, efforts to modernize arms control measures will have no effect. He added that Russia has initiated domestic procedures for withdrawal of the Open Skies Treaty. Russia initially announced withdrawal from the agreement after the U.S. pulled out last year. Doctors Without Borders says Ethiopian soldiers killed at least 4 civilians in northern Tigray region. In a statement, the international medical charity said the men were dragged off buses and executed by soldiers. MSF said federal troops also beat up an agency member and leveled life threats. It called for protection of civilians and for armed groups to respect the delivery of humanitarian assistance, including medical aid. Earlier, the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission said Eritrean soldiers killed more than 100 civilians in the Tigray conflict. International rights agencies have called for an independent investigation into the reports of war crimes in Tigray. A Soyuz 2.1B rocket has successfully launched 36 OneWeb satellites into the orbit. This comes as the London-based company continues its recovery from a tough 2020. European launch provider Arianespace launched the rocket from a Vostochny Chrome dome in Russia's Far East. The OneWeb satellites were put into a near-polar orbit at an altitude of 450 kilometers. The satellites were launched as a part of the company's effort to provide global high-speed internet access. It aims to provide internet access including 3G, LTE, 5G, and Wi-Fi coverage in remote areas. Meet Germany's puzzle king, Peter Schubert, who claims to have put together the world's largest jigsaw. More in this report.
It has taken a German puzzle enthusiast 4.5 months to put together a 54,000-piece jigsaw he claims is the biggest in the world. This vast jigsaw is 8.64 meters long and 2.04 meters high and shows an art gallery complete with visitors admiring the walls. They are adorned with famous artworks like Gustav Klimt's The Kiss, Monet's Poppies, and Girl with a Pearl Earring by Johann Vermeer.
I
work every day between 4 and 5 hours on the puzzle and once a week for a whole day, which felt a bit like a marathon of 12 to 14 hours.
What began as a distraction for Peter Schubert around 16 years ago is now his leitmotif. Schubert says he has assembled around 430,000 pieces in his life and still finds it thrilling.
For me personally, it is thrilling. It is a kick of adrenaline every time. My biggest goal is to get the picture right. That is what is so thrilling. And it gives me a very positive feeling when I make it to the end because it comes with certain recognition as well.
Schubert, who aims to reach the mark of assembling 500,000 pieces with his next work, is now waiting to see his achievement listed in the Guinness Book of World Records.
Sky is the limit has become obsolete thinking when it comes to the U.S. Space Agency's futuristic ambitions. Several attempts were made in the past for sending successful missions on Mars, but all proved futile. However, NASA's planned flight on Mars using its Ingenuity helicopter aims to change all that. This report has all the details.
NASA scientists are hopeful that the Ingenuity helicopter flight will be the end of a difficult journey spanning 6 years. In a press conference at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in California, scientists said the flight will become an aircraft's first on another planet.
Ingenuity will open new possibilities and will spark questions for the future about what we could accomplish with an aerial explorer. Could we image areas not visible from space or that a rover couldn't reach, like shadowed craters with seasonal water flow? Could a helicopter scout ahead for rovers and help plot the most efficient course for the best science?
The Ingenuity landed on Mars on the 18th of February, the most advanced astrobiology lab ever sent to another world. The Perseverance is on a mission to search for traces of ancient microbial life on the red planet. NASA scientists are hopeful that if the experiment becomes successful, it will represent a Wright brothers moment.
It has been a long journey, and everything from test programs that had failures in the early days, and you can roll the video, all the way culminating in actually building a Ingenuity flight model that is flight-worthy and can go to Mars. We have done a lot of testing, everything from the mechanisms to going into our 25-foot space chamber, which simulates the atmosphere of Mars.
Since the start of the Cold War, competition between the then Soviet Union and the U.S. to conquer space was an ever-present theme. The Soviets were the first to fly air vehicles on another world with their Vega balloons in the atmosphere of Venus in the 1980s.
European stocks are trading mixed after investors pulled back over the surge in COVID-19 cases in the region. The sentiment has taken a further hit as EU leaders discuss possible blocks on vaccine exports. The Pan-European Stock 600, Frankfurt's DAX, and the CAC 40 in Paris have shed marginally. London's FTSE and Italy's FTSE MIB have managed to claw up fractionally above the flat line. Earlier, Asian markets also traded mixed with mainland Chinese stocks and shares in Hong Kong shedding, while all other major bourses edged up. For the latest news updates, you can follow us on our social media at Indus.News.